Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your source material, your articles, notes, whatever you've got, and we just pull out the most important insights.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're looking at a really fascinating stack of documents comparing two U.S. states. We've got Colorado and Connecticut,
Right.
and we're going to use this contrast to explore how how it really shapes everything else, political, cultural, all of it.
It's a great mission for this one because the sources really set this perfect contrast, don't they? You've got the vast, high-altitude American West.
Yeah, rugged.
Totally. Versus the historically dense, really concentrated Northeast. The physical differences are just so profound.
They are.
They seep into every single aspect of life.
Yeah.
From how people live together to how they even think about themselves.
Exactly. So we're going to quickly dive into four essential comparisons that are laid out in your material. First, the landscapes, the sheer physical scale.
Right.
Second, the people. And this really curious concentration of population in each state. Third, we'll look at the institutional stuff, how their governments are set up, formal identifiers, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And finally, the really unique cultural touchstones, from professional sports all the way to state songs. This is going to be a deep dive into scale.
Let's start with that defining factor then, magnitude. The sources kick things off by establishing Colorado's immense size, placing it squarely in the western U.S.
And when you visualize Colorado, you have to remember that huge internal contrast. The whole western part, it's all Rocky Mountains, the highest peaks.
Absolutely.
But then the sources point out you go east and it basically flattens out into high plains. All the way to the Midwest. It's like two different states in one.
That geographical dominance is it's so critical it shapes everything. Infrastructure, climate, the culture.
Everything.
And when we talk about the Rockies, we are talking about serious elevation. The sources use that local term, a 14er.
Right.
Which, for anyone who's not familiar, that's any peak that goes over 14,000 feet high.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, governing a state that's crisscrossed by dozens of these enormous mountains.
Yeah.
That presents challenges that a flat state just rues, that it doesn't even have to think about.
And the state's very name is rooted right in that landscape, which I just find fascinating. It wasn't just a name picked out of a hat.
Not at all. The name Colorado, it comes from the Spanish word Colorado.
Meaning reddish color.
Exactly, reddish color. And this is a direct reference to either, the red sandstone you see everywhere in the region.
Right.
Or, more commonly, people think it's the reddish-brown color of the Colorado River itself. The state is literally named after the color of its own dirt and water.
So that natural marker defines it before anyone even gets there.
Precisely.
Okay, so hold that image in your mind. The vast peaks, the reddish-brown earth, the wide-open plains, and let's just pivot completely.
Okay.
To Connecticut, Northeast U.S. We are going from a state defined by monumental physical scale to one defined by just monumental human density.
The comparison is jarring. It really is. And the sources give us the numbers to prove it. Connecticut's total area is only 14,356 square kilometers.
Which is tiny compared to a state out west.
It's a minuscule footprint, but what it lacks in size, it more than makes up for in population concentration. The sources list Connecticut's population density at a staggering 702.9 people per square kilometer.
Wow. So we're talking about two fundamentally different ways of life.
Absolutely.
In Colorado, you could have these huge, sparsely populated areas where you could drive for hours and not see a town. Whereas Connecticut is all about proximity, historic towns, and just the constant presence of other people.
It's the difference between a culture of expansion and a culture of, consolidation. And that shift in scale has a profound impact on how the population spreads out.
Which is a perfect lead-in to our next section. Let's talk about those population centers and specifically the anomaly that is Colorado. The capital and largest city is Denver. And the sources highlight this hub-and-spoke model that you just don't see in many other places.
That's because the Denver metro area is home to nearly half of the entire state's population. I mean, look at the numbers here. It says 2.5 million people in the metro area.
Okay.
Compared to the state's total population of 4.3 million. So this isn't just a big city. It's the absolute center of gravity for the whole state, politically, economically, culturally.
So what does that do? What are the consequences of that kind of concentration? Does it mean the government in Denver is just disproportionately focused on city issues?
That's the question, isn't it?
And what about the people in those vast, empty eastern plains or the small mountain towns? Do they feel left behind?
That is precisely the tension that comes out of the source material. A state with one massive hub like that, it often struggles with regional representation.
I can imagine.
Governance, where the money for infrastructure goes, even cultural focus.
Mm-hmm.
It all inevitably tilts toward Denver.
Because that's where the voters are.
That's where the voters are, and that's where the economic activity is. It creates this tension between the enormous physical size of the state and the very small, concentrated reality of its population.
Okay, so if Colorado is defined by this one massive central hub, how does Connecticut compare? We know it's dense everywhere, but is it also concentrated in one place?
No, and that is the crucial difference. Connecticut is highly concentrated overall, but that population is more spread out across the landscape.
Ah, I see.
And that's partly because it's so close to New York and Boston.
Yeah.
Now, Hartford is the capital, and it's important. The sources cite a population just over 3.4 million for the whole state back in 2000.
Okay.
But the density is regional. You just don't have that 50% consolidation into a single city like you do with Denver.
So it's like a densely woven tapestry in Connecticut versus a huge open canvas with one big painted circle in the middle for Colorado.
That's a perfect analogy. And it means Connecticut's political influence is spread out among several smaller hubs, lots of historically important towns. It creates a very different legislative dynamic.
Interesting. Okay, before we move on, the sources did give one demographic snippet for Colorado. It notes the population is primarily Protestant, Christian, and Catholic.
Right.
Which kind of grounds the state in a pretty traditional Western U.S. demographic. So we'll carry that with us as we shift from people to institutions.
Let's do it. Moving to Section 3. Structure and sovereignty. While, a lot of U.S. states share a basic government framework, the sources give us some really specific details about how Colorado works.
We know it's got the three branches, right? Executive, legislative, and judicial. But let's look at the specifics that might cause that tension between Denver and the rest of the state.
Well, what's important to note is how the legislative power is defined. It's held by the Colorado People's Assembly, which is specifically described as bicameral, meaning two chambers. You have the Senate and the DPR, which is their House of Representatives.
So a standard two-chamber system.
It is, and it's designed for checks and balances. But in a state this centralized, the representatives are always trying to reconcile the needs of the mountain regions and the plains regions with the agenda coming out of the dominant metro area.
And I imagine something like water rights would be a huge issue.
Oh, absolutely. Water is existential in the arid West. Governing how that gets allocated becomes incredibly contentious with a structure like this.
So the structure is standard, but how it's applied has to deal with these massive regional divides, and it all flows from the governor's office and ultimately the Colorado Supreme Court.
It's a constant challenge of scale versus population.
Yeah.
And that leads us perfectly into how these states choose to identify themselves on a national level.
And this is where it gets really interesting. We have two completely different identity markers here. For Colorado, besides the postal code CO, there's a huge national honor cited. The USS Colorado was named specifically for the state.
That is a powerful symbol. Naming a naval warship after a state, that's an affirmation of its size, its physical importance, its perceived influence.
Right.
The identity it's projecting is one of physical strength, of resources, of national reach.
Now contrast that projection of power with Connecticut's main identifier, which is totally cultural and historical.
Yeah.
Their state song is Yankee Doodle.
I mean, Yankee Doodle is just dripping with historical context. It goes back to the French and Indian War. The British forces originally used it to mock the American colonists.
Right, for being so ill-equipped.
Exactly. And then the colonists famously adopted it as this anthem of defiance. So for Connecticut to make that its state song, it connects the state not just to U.S. history, but specifically to the colonial revolutionary roots of the Northeast.
It's an identity based on intellectual and cultural significance, not on sheer size or physical power.
The difference is striking, isn't it? One state uses a battleship to project its identity.
And the other uses a historic song to project its heritage.
It says so much about what each state values as its core identity. Colorado is its vast, dominant nature. Connecticut is its foundational historical role in the country.
That sets up our final section perfectly. How does that culture show up today? We look at Colorado defined by its massive hub, and you see this developed, high-profile pro-sports culture tied directly to Denver.
Absolutely. Professional sports teams are anchors for modern regional identity. And Colorado has strong representation. Baseball, football, basketball. The sources mention the Colorado Rockies in Major League Baseball.
Which serves as a huge gathering point for that regional pride.
For sure. And then you have the Denver Broncos. Your material calls them the pride team of Colorado.
Yeah.
That phrase alone tells you everything. An organized professional sport becomes this unifying cultural force that can actually bridge those massive geographical gaps between the mountains, the plains, and the Denver hub.
It gives people all across a huge fragmented state something singular and modern to rally around.
It's a shared current-day experience. It helps forge a collective identity, whether you live in downtown Denver or some tiny town on the plains.
Okay, so if Colorado's modern identity is unified by major league sports, we have to ask how Connecticut defines its culture. The sources don't really detail a similar pro-sports scene.
That's right. And Connecticut, instead, it leans heavily into its historical and institutional culture, which are, markers of a dense, well-established place.
And what's fascinating here is that the identity isn't defined by sports, but by these institutions that have been around forever.
We're talking about the presence of major historical centers, world-class universities, and a really deeply entrenched financial sector.
Right. Connecticut is sometimes called the insurance capital of the world.
Exactly. That's a reference to the concentration of huge insurance and finance companies in Hartford and the surrounding areas.
So this reliance on finance, on history, on education, rather than modern expansion or sports, it reinforces that historical identity we saw with the state song.
It does. Connecticut's identity is less about physical scale, more about intellectual and financial weight, all concentrated in a small, historically rich area. The culture is based on continuity, institutional power.
It's a perfect counterpoint to Colorado's identity based on geography and modern cultural anchors like sports.
Exactly.
So we've taken the source material and really built a comprehensive picture. On one hand, you've got Colorado, defined by this monumental reddish-colored geography, massive scale, a population centralized in Denver that creates this hub-and-spoke political challenge,
Right.
and a unifying modern culture built around teams like the Broncos.
And then you have Connecticut, defined by intense population density, minimal scale, influence that's dispersed across historical and financial hubs like Hartford, and an identity that's anchored in historical memory.
Right, with Yankee Doodle as the prime example. The differences aren't just in size, but in the entire approach to what it means to be a state.
The whole approach to identity.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? You started with a pile of facts comparing two states, and what we've seen pretty quickly is how geography really can dictate destiny. From the color of the river to the density of the population, every single data point connects. It paints a clear picture of two utterly contrasting American realities. This is the shortcut to understanding the why behind those facts.
And the contrast is powerful. It leads us to one final provocative thought for you to take with you.
Okay.
We noted that Colorado is fundamentally defined by a natural geographical origin, that reddish-brown river or sandstone.
Yeah.
While Connecticut is defined by a historic, human-created cultural element, the song Yankee Doodle. So when you think about stability and permanence, which type of identity marker? The natural, geographical one, or the historical, cultural one? Which do you think offers a more enduring and robust sense of place for the people who actually live there?
Wow, that's a profound question about national identity, and it's built right into these sources. A great question to think about.
It is.
Thank you for sharing your source material with us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.